Hello and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of the Gaggle, Peter Lavelle, and we are very honored to be joined by a very special guest, who, of course, needs no introduction to Gagglers. It is analyst, geopolitical thinker, and columnist Pepe Escobar. Welcome to the show, Pepe. Very, very glad that you met your deadline and still managed to make our show. So obviously the big news of the day.
Thanks, guys. It's a pleasure to be with you, and greetings from Thailand, everyone.
Well, anyway, the big news of the day, Pepe, obviously, is the strikes that Russia called in retaliation to the attack on the Crimean bridge on Saturday. Yesterday, President Putin essentially, made the announcement that this was an act of terror. It's been established it was an act of terror perpetrated by the Ukrainian security authorities. When he made that declaration, it was obvious that response was coming, and it came within a few hours. He's already made an announcement to his National Security Council that really this is just the beginning. If Ukraine continues with its terroristic activities, Russia will respond in an appropriate way. So, that's the setting. What's your take, Pepe?
Wow, I spent the whole day on it, literally. Starting with my 9 a.m. here in Asia, which was very, very early in the morning in Moscow. Huh? And I finished my article 10 minutes before I joined you guys. In fact, I was editing my article. We had like 4,000 or 5,000 words and went down to less than 2,000 with the absolute essentials, including the meeting of the Security Council, which basically, after everything that happened, the big decision was taken by Putin yesterday. That's absolutely clear. And obviously, he picked up his phone. He talked to the guys by phone. That's it, decided. And today, this was a pro forma Security Council where Shoigu told Putin what Putin already knew, in fact. So the whole thing was incredibly fast. Saturday, most of us, we were dejected, furious, like the whole Russian public opinion sphere and the military channels on Telegram. And obviously, everybody was baying for blood. We knew that would happen, but many of us were not expecting a kind of, I called it a Russian shock and awe, first phase. This is a shock and awe, not American style, because it's not indiscriminate. It's pinpointed, very well targeted. It is, of course, civilian infrastructure as well, because Russian civilian infrastructure was attacked twice, Nord Stream and Nord Stream 2, and Krymsky Most, Crimea Bridge. So they have a legitimate case to react. The way they're going to do it in the short to medium term, that's going to be very interesting, because I think this is just the begining. I would say this is the first phase of shock and awe. Go ahead, Peter.
But then, George asked a very important question, but George doesn't always overstate things. He tends to understate things. I mean, is this a message not to do it again? Well,
yes.
Okay. But who's making the decisions to do it? See, if we look at the entire history of this military conflict, decisions are made with very little regard or any regard for human life on the Ukrainian side, okay?
Yes.
I tend to believe the numbers that have come out, okay? Up to 60,000 Ukrainian casualties, 6,000 Russians, okay? Maybe it's somewhere in the middle, but I certainly think there's been a horrific loss of life on the Ukrainian side. And so attacking Nord Streams, the pipelines, and then we have the Crimean Bridge. I mean, somebody had to realize we're going to get walloped for this. But I mean, if it's Washington making the decision, it's not their infrastructure, it's not their people.
But that's the point.
And plus, we had the secret budget passed by Kiev a few days ago, secret because they don't want anyone to know how much the US is actually underwriting this entire affair. So, I mean, sending a message, don't do it again, but who's making the decisions to do it, Pepe?
Exactly, the message being sent to Washington. In fact, we have seen these past few days this crescendo of voices striving to find a diplomatic solution. Everybody from Elon Musk to the Pope is intervening now, because these people are getting them. These people are not the psycho neocons and neoliberal cons in DC. That's a completely different subspecies, right? We're talking about relatively sound people like Bergoglio, the Pope, and Elon Musk. Okay, he is relatively sound, at least, right? And the thing is, everybody knows that the decisions are made in Washington and subsequently in Brussels and never in Kiev. NATO gives the script to Elon Musk. The American generals and the American cells in Kiev give Zaluzny and everybody else the script to follow. Everything that matters in terms of intelligence and planning is done by the Americans, the Brits, and some extra NATO sideshows. Everybody knows that. So one of the aspects of what happened between yesterday, the decision by Putin, and the mini shock and awe or pre-shock and awe today, is a message. Number one, to Washington, look, you're not going to sit down to discuss. Okay, we're going to increment the pain dial. Today was just a little over 100 missiles. We have thousands, and we can do this every day if we want. So we already disabled 60% of the power generation in Ukraine, 75% of the internet. And the Starlink Elon Musk show is dead already. So that's it. If there was somebody in power in Kiev, they would pick up the phone and say, okay, let's discuss the terms of our surrender. We know this is not going to happen. But now they're going to have to listen to the pain dial every day. So what we've been discussing among us today especially is that everybody hopes this is just the first salvo. This is just the first phase of shock and awe. And they can increment progressively in the next few days to a point where Ukraine will be totally in the dark, for starters. And it will be literally plunged into the dark ages, much worse than in Iraq in 2003. I remember I was there. There were parts of Iraq that were still functioning in 2003.
So
Russia can
could I
Ukraine into the absolute dark. Go ahead, George.
Yeah,
yes.
No, let me ask a question. I mean, and this is something that Peter and I discussed at length yesterday. Would it have been made more sense for Russia to have started with this way back in February, rather than leaving it till October, 8 months later?
Of course, guys, you're absolutely right. And this is what many of us have been asking for 7.5 months now. The thing is, the concept of a special military operation, considering who was it launched against, and considering it was basically against NATO and Washington, and Kiev was just a pawn in their game, to quote Dylan again, I'm sorry, but that was not the right concept to begin with. And Putin, who made the final decision, thought he could get away from it because, and this is something we suspect but we cannot prove, faulty intelligence by the Ministry of Defense. It's going to be a cakewalk. You know how military act, right? So the Russians in this aspect, they're not very much different from the Americans or from Europeans. So they could have seen after a month or two that, oh shit, this is gonna be very complicated. It's gonna take very long. So now, considering that it's gonna take very long, okay, it's gonna take very long, but under our terms. This means this artillery barrage every day, decimating the Ukrainians. Go ahead, Peter. Yes.
Well, I think George and I talked about this at great length, and I think the difference is that the military intelligence that was when decisions were made based on that military intelligence, it was the assumption that there would be a special military operation against Ukraine. The miscalculation was it was going to be against NATO.
Yes. Absolutely. No, but no question about it. So how could the Ministry of Defense, the SVR, Foreign Intel, and GRU, military intel, how they did not know this? It's absolutely impossible. They probably knew it, but they were trying to, oh, no, we don't need it because, okay, there's another angle as well. They were thinking about the long-term war because basically they were launching war against NATO. So this could be a long-term multi-year war. So let's start softly, and then we increase little by little. And now it's time to increase little by little. What we saw today was still little by little. And Putin basically was all saying yesterday, you ain't seen nothing yet, in a relatively soft tone. Like, the message. Okay, we can increment anytime we want. You've seen it today. So you still don't want to talk, you still don't want to be reasonable. Okay, we'll keep going. So now at least the concept of special military operations restricted to Ukraine, it's over. Now it's a regime change operation. There's no question. Now they have to decapitate Kiev. If you don't decapitate Kiev, this thing won't be solved, at least in terms of the Western borderlands. Then we're going to have the Baltics. Then we're going to have Poland. That's another story. But
well,
yes, go ahead.
If I could just say real quickly here, and I'll pass it over to George, is a lot of people misunderstood or underestimated the denazification element here. And I think Pepe is absolutely right. And I think that people that understand the conflict understand the necessity of a regime change in Kiev. I'm sorry, George.
No, exactly. And I think just following on from that, why not decapitate Kiev now? Because Putin seemed to be saying today that, well, this is in retaliation for what you did, also for Nord Stream 1 and 2, also for the assassinations, including obviously Dugina's assassination, and that if you continue with this, then we're going to keep hitting you harder. But he didn't say like, well, we are going to continue. It's not even dependent upon what you do. We're going to continue because we're sick to death of everything. So he seemed to be suggesting that we will only continue if you continue with these terrorist acts. And I didn't think that was all that reassuring because you just want to wrap it up now. I mean, I think it's time for a decapitation and an end to the rule of the Zelensky gang right away.
Zelensky without a Z.
Yeah, I was going to say, Zhirinovsky or, Zinoviev, something I couldn't remember who I was talking about.
They all sound the same.
Exactly, they all sound the Z, yeah.
But look, there is, I'm sure Putin is considering that without raising much of a finger, he's destroying the European economy even before winter. So why not keep it going? It's so easy. You don't have to do anything. Literally, they are doing it to themselves. The German government is doing it to itself. The Italian government now under Meloni, an admirer of Zelensky, is doing for themselves. The Poles, the Baltics, all of them. So now there are two considerations running in parallel. Okay, we can decapitate anytime we want. We proved that today. At the same time, the spectacle of watching them, hang them high by themselves is too good to be true. Let's keep it going.
But I think it's really
these two parameters will play into Putin's medium and long-term decisions, right?
I think what kind of bewilders me a little bit, to be honest with you, is I agree. I like this two-track thing that you're talking about. I think you're absolutely right on that. But how did they get so out of parallel? Because they got the economy part, the energy part, they got that down to a T. I mean,
absolutely.
That was brilliant. I mean, I have to tell everyone, before it was all deleted on YouTube, I started ringing the bell after December 17th saying, it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, okay? And I was proven absolutely right. But I got one thing absolutely ass backward wrong. The ruble, I was totally flat-footed by that, okay? And now I kind of marvel at the planning that they did because they really, and you're right, it's barely starting to get cold. But
yes,
how did the special military operation get so out of whack with this other driver that we've been talking about? I'm bewildered by that.
Yeah, but look, I have I would say a partial answer to your question. Peter, from an American intel source, from one of those old school guys in the Beltway, who's now retired, but he still knows everybody. And he knows that this new generation is a bunch of absolute idiots. Basically, he said that this is the fault of Shoigu and Gerasimov, and they should be ejected. He was telling me that months ago, not now, not yesterday, months ago. So they miscalculated completely, and their intelligence was faulty, and they are incompetent. Shoigu is not a leading general. Shoigu is not like General Armageddon, who started yesterday, and his first day on the job, he destroys half of Ukraine. This is a real general. You know, now we're talking. This is war. This is not a special military operation.
I saw this meme this morning. It shows his face. He says, "Coffee is not the first thing you do in the morning."
He actually said that, Peter.
Did he say that?
This is a direct quote. He said that. So we are talking to a Russian equivalent of Colonel Kurtz in Apocalypse Now. You know. So this is the real deal. This is a war general, and this guy has experience in Chechnya, and he was the top general in Syria, the commander of the aerospace forces in Syria. So he's the guy who was targeting exactly where are we going to bomb ISIS leaders and Jabhat al-Nusra leaders. So he knows the terrain. Shoigu and Gerasimov, I'm sorry, no bloody way. So now we're talking. Now it's different. So and the fact that now they are using General Armageddon to make this seamless transfer from special military operation to anti-terror operation. And it's already in effect. They don't even have to announce it because this is what is already happening. Now this is an anti-terror operation, and they are going against not only anti-terror per se targets like Azov or something, but the guys who are facilitating the spread of neo-Nazism everywhere. This means the leadership and probably oligarchs that support the leadership as well. So General Armageddon now, and he has carte blanche. We had confirmation today that Putin gave him carte blanche. You can do anything you want except nukes. Everything else you can do it.
So wouldn't it make
this is only good, and this is what should have started on February 24. You're both right.
Well,
and it did.
Well, that's right. And you wonder now when are you going to start hitting the various ministries, command and control centers? Yes, exactly, command and control centers, because essentially because in February the Ukrainians clearly were in a panic. I mean, they started negotiating right away, and then once they saw how limited this special military operations were, they stopped being in a panic and they didn't want to negotiate anymore. So it is effective, when you that kind of shock and awe, when you terrify people, hey, they're suddenly panicking and they're ready to talk. So you kind of wonder, that's what you should have done and done it then. So we just have to see whether now it'll make a difference.
And that's another difference between the Russian shock and awe and the American shock and awe in 2003. In 2003, there was nobody to negotiate with because they tried. There was a plan before. They were trying basically to bribe Saddam's generals. They offered a lot of money to a bunch of Saddam's generals. Okay, you just leave and that's it. And then we roll into, and a lot of them didn't accept, including some of them who ended up as prisoners of war later on. And some of them in a lower rank formed ISIS, while they still imprisoned by the Americans later on in Camp Baka near Kuwait. The difference now is that this Russian tactic is also a way to force not the puppets, but the masters to sit down and negotiate. And that's why the Americans are absolutely terrified. They are paralyzed now. Did you see that there was no official response about what happened today from anybody, except what happened Saturday in Crimea Bridge? The Americans immediately rushed to do plausible deniability. The Washington Post published the typical unidentified Ukrainian official saying, "Oh no, it was the SBU that did it." So now the Americans have, via the Washington Post, plausible deniability. It's the empire of plausible deniability, always. Okay. But the thing is, and this is something that I call all of you who are watching to check when my column comes out, there is a bombshell inside the column that I on purpose put it in the fourth or fifth paragraph, because it's very, very hardcore. And it comes from a Russian intel source, but a Russian intel source that is telling a little bit more than the FSB is telling public opinion. The whole story of the truck bombing, which, by the way, is not a nice style truck bombing, because the driver didn't know that he was carrying explosives. And this intel source told me something even more, let's say, incandescent. And when you read the column, you're going to see it. This was only part of the plot. It was not only a truck bombing. There was something else.
Pepe, let's look at some of the timing here, because if the gates of hell have been opened, which I'm fundamentally very strongly against war. But in this case, I want this war to come. I want this war to come to an end.
Yes.
And so George said something to me yesterday. It's kind of eating away at me, because is there still some kind of sympathy inside the Kremlin that somehow we can make a deal with the West? Because my position is no, they don't believe that anymore. But if we look at the timing, winter is starting. Europe is in a complete mess, in tatters right now.
Absolutely.
Now, if this, and this is a geopolitical gambit here, you could get, they're not going to get, the Americans will never sign a surrender, okay? They'll keep it very quiet. That's why they want Zelensky to do it and let whatever happens to Zelensky. But to kind of wrap this up, so, they're defeated militarily. There's a regime change, but that's way before we get to sub-zero weather. And, the Russians said, no, the war's over. Okay, the war's over. So I think it's interesting timelines here that are involved, because I think all three of us believe this slow walk went nowhere. And I'll tell you, public opinion is pissed. I mean, we lost 6,000 boys when we could have been doing this, huh? Okay, believe me, public opinion matters in Russia.
Mm-hmm. And you touch a very important point, which is the ultra high level of education and diplomacy in Russia. In every official, everybody, Zakharova, Lavrov, Ryabkov, but they are polite when they speak, they reason, they express themselves beautifully. You can see that all of them had a fabulous education, and they believe in a Socratic dialogue, which is something that doesn't exist in the West anymore. So they are always still hoping that there's going to be some sort of, a Socratic, Platonic, or Aristotelian, well-educated guy from Stanford or Yale that would, let's sit down and have a civilized conversation. And we can see that the guys who are running this operation in DC, no one qualifies. Even though you have excellent American analysts like McGregor, like Larry Johnson, etc., or Scott Ritter, etc. And this is what they're basically praying for somebody in DC to pick up the initiative. But look at the people in the crash test dummy administration. Nobody qualifies. Jack Sullivan is a joke. We all know that. Blinken is a third-rate mini diplomat, mega mediocre. He plays in a rock band. That's it. He should stay playing badly in a rock band.
And Victoria Nuland is still there.
That's right.
And Victoria Nuland is running she's running the State Department because Blinken is a wimp. It's Nuland that runs the State Department side by side with all those psycho neocons. So nobody from this gang would be willing to sit down and have a strategic discussion. Remember when at the end of last year, when we had a last chance of maybe not going into war, what happened in February, the indivisibility of security dialogue proposed by the letters Russia sent to Washington. And it was met with a non-response, a dismissive non-response.
But this is it, the Pepe, and this has been true since the dissolution of the Soviet Union, is that the United States was never going to accord Russia the respect that it did accord to the Soviet Union. It's never going to happen. And so for 30 years, the Russian leaders have been waiting for this show of respect. It was never going to happen. They had utter contempt for Russian leaders. They basically tossed away their country. They tossed away their military allies. why should we respect them? And so when all the talk like Obama, oh, Russia doesn't produce anything anyone wants, or McCain, gas station with nuclear weapons. It was naive of Russian leaders to continue to expect, after everything that's happened, that, oh, well, one day they're going to sit down at the table and show us respect. No, they show you no respect, and they don't intend to show you any respect. We've known this, everything 30 years. We've known Minsk and everything. Of course, they were never going to implement Minsk. They just said, yeah, sure, Minsk. And they had no intention of implementing Minsk.
Yeah, naive, but also a sign of their grace and noble spirit, isn't it? Because they keep believing that dialogue is possible, even against all odds, and even with a bunch of cycles running American foreign policy. So hats off to them. It's a sort of Taoist patience ad infinitum, But apparently, if Putin is not Taoist anymore, he prefers General Armageddon.
Okay, but Pepe, that really begs the question, and I think we're going to have to wait for your book on it, or for future historians.
I hope so.
What explains this, I was going to say mediocre, but they're less than mediocre political class in Europe? I mean, it's really extraordinary how we've seen elite capture of all of the elites in Europe captured by Washington and their underling, London, because I've never seen a political class so inept in my life. It is extraordinary what we see here. The only way I can account for it is that they all talk about diversity, but there's no diversity of thought. It's all neoliberalism. And George and I have gone on and on about how you can replace you could take the leader in France, put him in Sweden, take the Sweden person, put him in Austria. It's all the same. It's all the same. Okay. It doesn't matter, their sex, gender, orientation, age. They're all carbon copies of each other. And they are low octane thinkers. I mean, what they have going for them is ideological possession, and they think that can trump capabilities, meritocracy, because there's no meritocracy. It's extraordinary to me.
There's a partial answer to your question. In fact, it's a period that it's not translated in English anymore. It's one of the best books published in these past few years by Professor Andrea Zoc. He's professor of ethical philosophy at University of Milan. I read his book at least 3 times, and his main thesis is absolutely brilliant. It all started with May 68 and with modernism, and modernism derived from May 68. So his critique of Foucault, Derrida, Baudrillard, Deleuze, all of them I deeply admire. I study all of them in French. I still follow them. But when I read Zoc, and I said, oh man, he hit it. That's it. So it's all there. So the dissolution of discourse, the basis of transgenderism, it's all there. And these people, remember Joschka Fischer, who was the father of these assholes nowadays, Habeck, Baerbock, etc. Joschka Fischer was one of the children of May 68. So this analysis is the most brilliant I've seen anywhere in any language these past few years. And it answers a lot of our questions in terms of how narrow-minded, arrogant, and ignorant this new generation of European politicians are. And it's everywhere. It's in Germany, it's in France, it's in Italy, it's in Spain, everywhere, the Scandinavians, not to mention the Baltics, who studied in Western universities, the same. It's like they came from the same playbook. They don't think the same way. They're not thinkers, as you said, they're not thinkers. They are carbon copy reproducers of some script that they read somewhere, or a bad translation of Foucault, for instance, that kind of shit, and that explains a lot, because it's a sort of they are totally mentally blocked. And of course, I was talking about Socratic dialogue before. They are incapable of understanding dialectics. They're incapable of reasoning. Can you believe that you watch the news this morning and you see that Ursula von der Leyen is saying that she doesn't trust the version of the Crimea bridge bombing by the Russians, even though the Ukrainians admitted it. That happened. So this is it's not against reason. This is non-reasoning. You know, how can you argue with people like that?
You can't. And that's why, and I'll pass it over to George. That's why, what was it, 2 weeks ago, Putin said, this is not a bluff, because you have to say that to these people.
Right. No, that's right. And that is what is astonishing. And, you know, because at least when you come to the Americans, we can see a strategy there. I mean, it's brutal, it's ruthless, it's cynical, may even be self-destructive. But it's hard to understand what the Europeans, I mean, people are constantly asking, why would you be doing something that is so contrary to their interest? And it's very hard to answer the question. Why would they do something that is obviously destroying their economies and leading to complete impoverishment and immiserization of their public? That doesn't make any sense. So you have to, what is the answer to that?
Especially because they don't understand economy and they don't understand real life. If you spend one day at the European Commission headquarters in Brussels and you see how it works, you understand everything. The only thing that these 28,000 bureaucrats with mega fat salaries paying no taxes, you know, the only thing they think about, la retraite, retiring, coming here to Thailand. One of my friends, in fact, he came here to Thailand and he got a house the size of a neighborhood in Thailand. That's his retirement for working as a assistant of a commissioner to the European Union in Brussels. This is what they think about. They think about their careers. They're self-centered. They have no idea how an average citizen lives in the suburbs of Paris or in the suburbs of Milan or Rome. No idea. Their minimum salary for a simple functionary in the European Commission is 10,000 euros, not taxable. Plus all the extra expenses and the expense account, the travel, free education, if they are transferred to another country, school for the children, you name it, you know. And when they retire with full pension, non-taxable. So it's an enormous racket. And you see that most people that profit from this, from Eastern Europeans and the bloody Baltics. Much more than the French, the Germans, they're much less French, Germans, Dutch, or Spanish or Italians compared to people from Eastern Europe or the Baltic nations. And that's why their voice inside the commission is so loud and shrill, because they have a sort of a informal majority. The new ones coming from Eastern Europe. Yes, go ahead.
We have the midterms coming up in the US. It's 30 days away. And if you're a political animal and you want to win and you want to outflank your opponent, well, there's that empty lane there, like what J.D. Vance says. You know, Ukraine, I don't care. Now, I mean, this is an opportunity that is just, you know, it's such low-hanging fruit. You hit your head on it, okay? Now, this would be an opportunity, given, you know, the polls and pundits and everything. George and I always give a Republican candidate 5 extra points on any public opinion poll, at least 5. That we could have a moment of truth here. You know, there is Ukraine fatigue, the enormous sums that are being sent. I mean, I used to complain about the money that was sent to Israel every year. I mean, that's like a shot of
a shot compared to the exact.
Yeah. Okay. So, well, you know, Republicans are dumb. They're really thick. Okay. They're just as sensitive to their donors as Democrats. But every once in a while, in a generation, you get a winning thing that you don't have to work for, okay? So does that make any sense to you that, you know, there could be a, you know, come to Jesus moment, you know, this is Biden's war, not our war, it's Biden's war, because it's totally effed up, okay? So it's time to run from it, okay? And 1 month from now would be perfect timing. Look, there's no downside. Well, I supported the Iraq war, but I changed my mind. Or Joe Biden, I never supported it. They all lie, okay? But this is an inflection point here. And it's such an easy one to grab. Do you think they're going to have anyone with any common sense is going to say, hey, this is a winner?
You know, some American friends, I think they gave me a shot of realism. In fact, I was asking the same question that you just asked, and they said, look, not much, even if the Republicans win in November, not much is going to change. Of course, consider this is Biden's war, and they're going to play but it's not they're going to abandon Ukraine from one day to another. No, they probably would like to keep it going, but in a sort of more low-key manner. I think we still don't know. I think there's a very strong chance that after the midterms, preparing the terrain for the next presidentials, the Republicans can say, no, we're going to end Biden's war. And obviously, this is going to be a killer in electoral terms. As you said, if they have a minimum of IQ above room temperature, that's what they're going to play for.
But that's really the problem, that they're not sure what argument to make. Is the
argument to make? Yes.
Yes. Is the argument that we shouldn't bother with Ukraine because it's way, thousands of miles away and we don't know anything about it. It's a fight between people that we know nothing about. Or is the argument that, oh, Biden should have done more. Biden should be doing, sending a lot more to Ukraine. They don't know which argument to take. So they go from one to the other. And of course, they confuse their audience because now they don't know, should we do more or should we do less for Ukraine? And they don't know themselves.
Well, they should listen to Tucker Carlson every night.
Yeah.
Tucker is a sort of spokesperson for the silent and not so silent majority in the US nowadays. He's giving a platform for these guys on a plate. This is what he should do.
Yeah.
And most Americans, they don't give a fuck about Ukraine. It's obvious. They don't even know where it is.
No.
And when they look at 60 billion, 70 billion going to Ukraine, which will have to be paid by somebody. And guess who the somebody is? Europeans. Because this is mostly land lease. Land lease means these weapons goes to Europe. Europe sends this weapon to Ukraine, and Ukraine has to pay them back eventually. So they're going to have to pay back the Europeans. And obviously, they won't have anything to pay back the Europeans. So what's going to happen? The Europeans are going to send squads to take over infertile Ukrainian land because the Americans took the fertile Western Ukrainian land already. So what's left for the Europeans?
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you here. I mean, because we have this kind of ideological blockade on their brain, I don't see any, when the war's over, you're not going to sit down and shake hands and sing Kumbaya, okay? They're not going to do that because they can't, okay?
Definitely.
So, I mean, what is this? This is a fundamental breach that's going on. Obviously, the big winner in all of this is going to be the US. Okay, great. 3 cheers for hammering down hegemony in Europe. Wow, what that's like getting the, I remember, I was just growing up and they started giving out 13th place ribbons. Like I thought there was only 3. Okay, now they got 13th place. And then you get a ribbon for showing up. Okay, but I mean, what is the prize of Europe? I mean, sure, the U.S. will nail the LNG market. Okay, fine. They'll make money there. But the key to Europe, at least in the post-war era, has always been its prosperity and productivity.
Yeah,
they're not going to have either. So, I mean, what is it? What is really Europe versus Washington then? I mean, if their productivity goes down, their wealth declines. So their ability to consume American produced goods will go down as well because they'll be priced out of the market. They just won't have the money.
Absolutely. They already don't, Peter. And because they lost the fuel of this prosperity for the past 50 years or so, cheap Soviet and then cheap Russian energy. That's gone. That's gone. That's it. Unless there's some sort of a Virgin Mary hail pass out of nowhere, and the German government says, "Okay, we're going to open Nord Stream 2," which they can do tomorrow, by the way. And Gazprom already said it's ready to go.
That's why that was why it was blown up, because the Germans were thinking maybe we can, compartmentalize.
And the Germans confirmed, of course, off the record, there was already a secret channel of negotiations between Berlin and Moscow. Okay, let's try to find a way, especially with Nord Stream 2. And the Americans, when they got hold of that, you know what happened. Okay, so that was the number one reason for the timing of the blow up of Nord Stream and Nord Stream 2. It didn't solve anything because they were incompetent enough to blow up only 3 instead of 4 strands. And with what's left of Nord Stream 2, half of Nord Stream 2, they can pump half of the total amount of gas they were pumping on Nord Stream 1, which is not so bad. That would at least prevent General Winter destroying the German economy and parts of other EU economies as well. So that's still there. But the thing is, with Scholz, Habeck, Baerbock, can you have a rational decision like that? We know, everybody knows, out of the question. So they're going to freeze to death. There's no question about that. So, but the big picture, which I think is even more astonishing, is that the German government and affiliated governments in Europe, like Macron and even Meloni, which is basically a Zelensky admirer and an Aspen Institute product, they are among themselves facilitating this absolute descent into the maelstrom, the abyss of the whole European economy, in fact. So the tactical victory of the Americas is even more astonishing because, okay, they applied the first move and all the subsequent moves are applied by the Europeans themselves. That makes it even more, it's really unbelievable from a rational point of view. We can understand because all these people are fifth columnists. So it's easy to, and they have been infiltrated into the machinery of the European Union for decades. So now the Americans are just, ripe fruits falling on the ground. Perfect, But the thing is, okay, so what are you going to do with an imploded Europe if you are an American multinational company? You cannot expect to have these people buying your products anymore. They'll be basically practically starving themselves with their meager pensions, So are you going to sell to Asia? The Asians are not very much interested because the Asians are now almost all of them involved in a very, very large process of Eurasia integration, but almost everyone is on board apart from the Japanese, which is what? An occupied island. Still World War II playing in Japan. South Korea, which is basically trying to play, hedging their bets. They're hedging their bets, but they're looking at what? They're looking at the Eurasian market for first-class South Korean products, and ASEAN, here where I am, the ASEAN 10, which is a booming region of the world that no one in the West talks about. But the way that, for instance, that Thailand, Indonesia are growing, Indonesia is going to be a superpower in 30 or 40 years. That's nothing, It's the Chinese, they became a superpower in 30-something years. The Indonesians are doing the same thing now. They're starting now, So this is the future in terms of Eurasia integration with all areas of Eurasia. They don't care about the West. They don't care about last month I was in Uzbekistan, and it was fantastic because I was watching in real life an economic boom equivalent to the economic boom in Southeast Asia during the 90s. So what was happening in Vietnam in mid-1995 is happening now in Uzbekistan in the middle of the 2020s. Fascinating. Obviously, so where do they look? They look to China, they look to Russia, they look to Turkey, they look to Iran, they look to the, to the Chinese in the region, because they know all these guys are our players, and we're going to become a strong regional power very, very soon.
And so with the end,
is isolated from everybody. Yes, go ahead, George.
No, I mean, and with the end of the dollar as the reserve currency, the United States won't be able to do to these Asian economies what they did to them in the 90s. I mean, they brought them to their knees. They're not going to have the power to bring them to their knees anymore.
You're right, George. That's a very good point, because there won't be an Asian financial crisis like the one in 1997. Forget it. There was a one-off, and it didn't last too long, because the Asians after that, they understood, okay, oh, we're not gonna be indebted in US dollars anymore. That was our big mistake. We won't do it again. So they trade in their own currencies, and obviously ASEAN is considering an ASEAN mutual currency for bilateral trade and multilateral trade in the region. They are part of the discussions in the Eurasian Economic Union to have intra-Asian and pan-Eurasian alternative currency bypassing the dollar as well. This is something that, well, the train has left the station. They are discussing this deeper and deeper inside the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, inside the BRICS, now with the BRICS Plus as well, with the new members that are coming. There's a long line of nations that want to be members of the SCO and members of BRICS Plus as well, and some want to be members of both. You know, so the convergence is that it's amazing, because it's something that has been happening in the past few months. The acceleration, the crazy acceleration. It's after the beginning of the special military operation, and when they saw how the collective West reacted, they said, no, now we got to get our act together very fast. We were doing that before, but it was very slow. Now it's very fast. So you know, Pepe, that's some. Yes, go ahead.
It was really interesting. Because we're in the George and I are in the Western world. You remember the infamous waste of time, waste of money G7 meeting a few months ago, and a day later I was doing crosstalk, and I had an Indian woman, an academic, and I'd made reference to the G7, and she said, "Yeah, that kind of made it on page 7 here." You know, we don't care.
Page 7, wonderful. Yes, it's not important. It's not important. The G20 in Bali next month is going to be quite something, because the Asians are going to be talking among themselves, and you're going to have the Westerners completely isolated in their own bubble.
Okay, Pepe, I have a question for you. We can see that the Russians can turn up the pain dial. Today was the perfect example. Okay.
Yes.
How does NATO end up in all of this? Because, you know, NATO's first playbook was the breakup of Yugoslavia. Russia was weak. And so they had pretty much their free hand there. Then they were backers, the Eastern Europeans, I'm glad you mentioned that, backers of the coup in 2014. And now we have NATO as a de facto co-belligerent in the conflict in Ukraine now. I don't see how they come out of this unscathed. I would even go as far as to say, even though the academics, we've been asking for decades, what is the use of NATO because of the end of the Cold War? But that's going to be a real question, because they can see, this is the dilemma. Neither side could afford to lose. One side has the capacity and the time to win, and the diplomatic finesse. George and I have commented on this repeatedly. NATO is going to come out very, very banged up, and if they can't beat Russia, then what's the whole point of NATO?
That's the great thing, because this is going to be crystal clear for the whole global South. Not only for the Eurasians as a whole, but for the whole global South, for the Latin Americans, for the Africans, for everybody. So obviously, NATO will implode. And a wonderful agent of implosion is going to be our friend Sultan Erdogan, who in fact is already imploding NATO little by little with his perpetual hedging of bets. You know, it's fascinating. This is something that even my Kemalist friends in Istanbul, they admitted it. Yeah, now, okay, he sucks, but now he's playing it beautiful. Yeah. They even recognize that among academic circles, the best academic circles in Turkey, they admit it. And Erdogan is very good at that. And nobody knows what he's going to do next. And at the same time, he is posing as a bridge between East and West. Now, he's suggesting Istanbul to be the seat of the table for the negotiations between Russia and NATO without Ukraine, because he already knows that Ukraine doesn't matter. It's a pawn in their game. So, okay, you have 4 NATOs and Russia, same table in Istanbul, and I'll be the mediator. Can you imagine that the Americans sooner or later really, might even accept it?
It's really interesting. Over the past few weeks, I've been quite fascinated following Erdogan, because he's kind of like the guy that can go in the room, the NATO world room, and then he can go outside and have like a quick smoke and a coffee, and he says, you know what's going on in there? And it's like an insight. I really get a kick out of that. because he loves to do it.
Brilliant. It's brilliant.
I'll be back in 2 minutes. He gets on Twitter. Okay,
right.
It's
and that's right. And he said the other day, which was an important thing. I think he was in an interview with CNN, and he said Russia wants a reorganized security arrangement with Europe. I mean, we of course know that, but since Erdogan is a member of NATO, he's pretty much saying, yeah, this needs to be done. I mean, and clearly that the Americans had made a huge blunder in just simply dismissing this altogether. One other wild card, of course, not as important as Erdogan, is Hungary's Viktor Orban. So, yes. I mean, you saw the other day, which was rather interesting, when Vučić, the president of Serbia, said, "Oh, Orban told me, and he's allowed me to reveal this confidence, that in 1999, NATO was trying to get Hungary to invade Serbia." This is clearly Orban has authorized
talking
him to
about
reveal
this
that.
Now. The timing of talking about this now is brilliant.
Yes,
this is an extra knock on NATO's coffin. Absolutely, absolutely. So exactly. So Erdogan and Orban are the two key elements for this total disaggregation of NATO. So what NATO is going to have in the end, the 3 Baltic midgets, the Poles, and that's it. And everybody else will be thinking about something different. Macron, for instance, deep down, according to some Paris cafe circles that are familiar with the way he thinks and the way he talks to David Rothschild practically every day, he doesn't want NATO. He wants a sort of De Gaulle style force de frappe, French force de frappe, allied with some others, but not NATO, because in his mind, NATO is an American thing, and he doesn't want NATO to be subordinated to the Americans forever. And he's right.
De Gaulle, well, he was De Gaulle. Okay.
He was De Gaulle. It's not Le Petit Roi. I don't need to say more.
Yeah. But the France of De Gaulle had assets and prestige.
Prestige, absolutely. And full industry, on the way to industrialization, everything.
And you had a De Gaulle that could say no to America without breaking a sweat, okay? We don't have that in France today. France is broken, okay? If Macron could have, if he'd had a De Gaulle moment, if he had had contact with his inner De Gaulle, he might have been able to be someone of importance. But there is no inner De Gaulle in Macron.
Of course not, Peter. He is a lowly mergers and acquisition banker, a mere functionary. That's it. He would be forever at the Ministry of Finance in a very, very secondary role if he was not spotted by some people in the French establishment, including the ultra-powerful head of the Institut Montaigne, which is the CEO of AXA, the huge securities firm. And I say, okay, this guy's perfect because he looks like a leftist, he talks like a leftist, but he is a rightist. He's perfect for us. So they invested and they built Macron from scratch. And as a cipher, they invented a party for him, the whole lot. It's a fabulous story of basically inventing a virtual candidate out of nowhere. That's what he is now.
It's a little bit,
and the French are finally starting to see that, but that's too late because these idiots voted the guy for a second term.
Right. Well, I mean, not dissimilar from Barack Obama. Again, somebody completely invented. Came from nowhere. Seemed like a leftist. Actually, he wasn't a leftist.
Exactly.
But there's another interesting angle is what happens in Germany, because remember with De Gaulle, the problem De Gaulle had was that West Germany just refused to go along with it, wanted to stick with Washington. What's Germany going to do now? I mean, is it still going to stick with Washington, or is it decide we've had it with the Americans?
But that's the problem, George. With this government, you need a cataclysm, you need an asteroid hitting the Reichstag or something like that for them to see the light. And to see the light is very obvious. It's a 2 + 2 = 4 kind of thing, but they cannot do it. For them, it's always 5 or 6 or 0, and the Germans voted for these people. Yeah. So now they're paying them. So what's happening in France and in Germany? You are paying the price for voting for this bunch. It's simple as that. It's as tragicomic as it is. That's what it is. So unless there is a sort of, I would say, an internal coup in Germany financed by industrialists, you know, from Hamburg or from the Ruhr Valley, etc., who will see that they are going down under.
Pepe,
So you have to be a political cataclysm inside Germany.
This is what George and I talked about all the way back in autumn of last year. Is that, I mean, you know, the Free Democrat, the Social Democrats. I mean, they do have a pedigree. I mean, and we all know, because this is where progressive, not in a leftist way, but progressive thinking about Germany's position in the world. You know, we have Willy Brandt, we have people like this. I mean, thinkers, real thinkers. And that's why Washington hates them. They hate Sergeant Schultz because he's a social democrat, okay? Yes. But the Free Democrats and others, see, George and I were hoping, you know, praying, you know, for the tooth fairy, I suppose, is that, come on, you guys you're not gonna pull the plug on the entire industrialization of this country. I mean, you really aren't gonna do it, but they did.
They did. They're doing it. Exactly. So, for instance, Gerhard Schröder, the problem is Gerhard Schröder was marginalized by all these people, Greens, etc. Schröder would be an excellent channel between Russia, oligarchs, energy lobby, you name it, even the Kremlin, and top industrialists in Germany. Let's try to find a pact and let's get out of this together. But for that, we need cheap Russian energy again. And you know it, and every single industrialist in Germany knows it. Right. But how are you going to pass through this green wall? Habeck, Baerbock, and all these, it's out of the question. Once again, unless there is a political cataclysm and a sort of white coup in Berlin, which is something that we don't see it coming from.
No, and I mean, for instance, the Alternative für Deutschland, they're now rising in the polls.
They are rising, but in the East, not in the West.
Yeah, in the East, but
in the East. Yeah.
But even, all right, but they could, you know, they might. I mean, they at least they have a message against what you know, NATO is doing. But
in the next elections, in the next elections, they're going to be a force. Yeah,
that's right. But no one wants to have anything to do with them. So you have to. How do you break through that? That somebody is going to say we need to form a coalition government with the Alternative for Deutschland, because the German Christian Democrats say no, absolutely not. Under no conditions would have anything to do with them.
Well, so we have the Sweden model.
Exactly.
We have the Sweden model. Nobody's going to touch it's the
Swedish Democrats. Swedish Democrats.
Nobody touches it. They have poison ivy, if not worse. Okay.
Wow. And Sweden, in terms of hardcore neo-Nazis in disguise, wow, I've seen few places like that. Apart from certain neighborhoods in Santiago in Chile, Sweden is top of the line in terms of neo-Nazism in Europe. Mm-hmm. Disguised as progressives, or transgender progressives.
Well, I mean, my point is that we have this party in Sweden that they had an amazing electoral victory. The people spoke, and these people are conservative. They're not anything worse than that. I wouldn't even call them populist, okay? But the fact is, all the other parties from across the entire spectrum won't have anything to do with them. So it doesn't matter what the electoral outcome is. We have paralysis, okay?
Paralysis.
And that would essentially happen with Germany. We're rapidly running out of time, but Pepe.
Yes, go ahead.
One of the things that, you know, all three of us have thought about over the recent events is that, I don't know if this is a provocative question or not, it's certainly depressing. Have we seen the last chapter of keep the Russians out, the Germans down, and the Americans in? Have we seen the last chapter here?
Yes. No, I don't think it's the last chapter, because the Americans, as a wounded empire, they will want to keep in terms of controlling Europe as long as it takes, and even if they have to take no prisoners to do it, which they will, considering the cycles in power over there. You know, they won a tactical victory. They are destroying Europe. So their tactical victory at the moment stands. We don't know how long it's going to last, because then we'll depend on the Europeans, growing a pair and waking up. I'm not sure this is going to happen anytime soon. And at the same time, we're going to see this evolving Eurasia integration process. We're going to see Russia-China strategic partnership stronger and stronger than driving this mechanism. And next year, with the crisis in Europe, a crisis in the US, and intra-Eurasia growing, we're going to see the world definitely split in two. And this is the new post-globalization environment. The world is already divided in two, and I would say these two poles are irreconcilable.
Yeah, I agree, because I think the Americans are they're not giving up on, they're not going to give up on NATO. NATO is their prize, and that's how they exert their control over Europe. Without Europe, I mean, America ceases to be
it's an island.
Superpower.
It's just an island, exactly. So they are. It's the specter of Mackinder is always there, guys, isn't it? It's amazing. Huh? It's amazing. They are hostages of Mackinder, in fact. Yeah. And when they look at the mirror, they're terrified, because what Mackinder said now is happening.
It's right. It's happening because Mackinder actually works because they believe in it. Okay.
Yes, and they all believe in
their own interests. It's amazing. It's against their own interests. It's amazing.
So Eric, Pepe, thank you so much for giving us your time. It was a really fascinating discussion.
Thank you, guys. Thanks a lot.
We really enjoyed it. Our gagglers have been demanding, we want Pepe. We want Pepe. When are you going to have Pepe on? So thankfully.
Thank you very much.
So and, thank you.
And may the Buddha protect us all. We need it.
Eric, hope to see you again very soon. Remember, if you like the Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.